Okay. Good morning.
Good
And
morning.
thank you, Cheryl and Twin Cities, for inviting me to speak this morning. And yes, I was not six. I was 27 when I first went to Twin Cities. Had just turned 27 because it was September of 1973. Um, I started in August of 1973 as a minister at the Midwest Buddhist Temple. I was 26 at the time yet, but I had turned 27. Um, and yeah, this morning is our regular monthly Zoom service. You have two services a month, but this one is on Zoom. It's our Prep Memorial Service, and it is Father's Day. Um, and the Pet Memorial is a special time, a time to remember our pets, our pets who are part of our family. And it's time to remember our pets, and what they brought to our lives. On a personal note, um, I'm a dog person. That is, our pets were dogs by our choice. There are cat people, there are bird people, goldfish people, and hedgehog people. Uh, and so on. But from our dogs, I know I learned patience. Um, and it's amazing how quickly our dogs trained us humans how to take care of them. It's something I'm still amazed at. Our dogs were small and they were definitely lap dogs. And they each had their own personality. But they somehow trained us. They told us how to take care of them, what they needed, when they needed to go for a walk, when they um, needed attention, whatever. But you always got the feeling us humans were allowed to share the space with them. I thought it was supposed to be the other way around, but no. Uh, but anyway, that's how much pets become part of our lives. And I know our dog showed my wife and I such loyalty. And what's really amazing is that unrestricted love. They just became part of our family. And we saw the pictures of some of the pets of the Twin Cities Sangha. And I hope we all remember and could appreciate, all that animals, all that our pets have been, how much they mean to us as they were part of our lives. This morning is also Father's Day. Oh, you mean that secondary parental holiday? Um, Somehow Father's Day is not about flowers, candy, cards like Mother's Day. Um, but each and every one of us have fathers. Um, and in a more meaningful way, all of us have several fathers. Some have stepfathers, some have uncles who are like fathers, other men in our lives who are father figures, teachers, coaches, community leaders, and many more. So those father figures we also celebrate today. Um, this morning, I'd like to share a story about my own father. It was several years ago, back in 1995. It was when my father passed away, actually just before. Um, during that time, I was not an active minister, but Reverend Nishimura of the Placer Buddhist Church asked me to speak at Placer. And the Placer Buddhist Church is in Penryn, California, where I grew up. It's about 30 miles northeast of Sacramento. It was a tree fruit area with plums, peaches, and pears were the main crops. But in 1995, for Gotae, the Shinran's um, uh, birth birthday service in May, I was invited to give the Dharma message, and the message that morning was about not putting things off, not to procrastinate. Procrastinate? Who does that? um, but I told a real life story that morning. It was the story of a young man whose father had passed away at home after struggling with a stroke for many years. When the funeral home came to take the body of the father out of the house, the son was walking alongside the gurney, holding on, touching his father, and he was crying and saying, "He never told me he loved me. He never told me he loved me." And he kept repeating it as they took the body out. Um, this son never heard his father say that he loved him. The father was a typical Nisei, a second generation Japanese American, someone who rarely showed emotion. But perhaps it was also part of that whole generation that they call the greatest generation, those that grew up in the Depression, um, and came to uh, start their families after the war, after 1945. But they call them the greatest generation because that is the generation that supposedly won World War II. Um, but that generation did not show emotion. So it was not unusual, but it still didn't change. The son wanted his father to tell him that he loved him. Something the son felt was missing. And I mentioned that this was a reminder of other things, not to put things off till tomorrow, to do things today that needed to be done today, and not to procrastinate, not to put things off until tomorrow. And that was the gist of the message, and of course, a message that should resonate all the time. But um, after the service, my father and Reverend Nishimura were standing outside the back door. They were talking about the trip that they were going to take that afternoon to the Reno Hawakai. The Reno Hawakai, Hawakai literally means Dharma gathering. So there was a small sangha, Hawakai, in Reno, Nevada. It was part of the Placer Buddhist Church, and it's about 2 hours away, but it's over the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so about 8 times a year, the minister from Placer would go to Reno to have a service. And a few of the Placer members would also take the trip. Among them would be my dad. But as I walked out to the back door to have a cigarette, my father looks up and says very quietly, "You know, Ron, I love you." It floored me. It absolutely floored me. Number one, he was actually listening. And number two, he actually said those words. And it was really amazing to me. I also remember looking over at Reverend Shimura and reminded him to make sure he told his children, or even if it's over the phone, that he loved them. And after lunch, they had otoki after the Gotaya service. So after lunch, my mother took me to the airport to fly back to Chicago, Sacramento's being about 30 miles away. My father and the group went up to Reno, um, but I came home to Chicago, and the following day, and I remember it very well, it was about 7 p.m., which would then be 5 o'clock in California. About 7 o'clock, I get a phone call from my mother saying the ambulance is taking Dad to the hospital. And sure enough, a few more hours later, my mother called back to say that, to share the bad news that my father had passed away. It looked like he had a heart attack. In retirement, my parents had a small 5-acre orchard of peaches and pears. And my father had gone out into the orchard and using his favorite Ford tractor, he was cutting the grass down so that the could irrigate better. He was cutting the grass, but he had turned off the engine and put his head down over the steering wheel. And when my dad didn't come in for dinner, my mother went out to look for him. And that's when she found him. But he was fortunate because he was able to do what, as they call it, to die with your boots on. He was sitting on his favorite tractor and he was doing something he enjoyed, and his heart had given out. It was really tough on the family, of course, for the ones that remained behind. The suddenness, of course, was shocking, and he was only 74 years old. Um, and when I look back upon it, I'm the most a most fortunate. I'm a most fortunate son because I happened to be speaking at Placer Buddhist Church that day. Because my father was listening, I got to hear those magic words. You know, Ron, I love you. And so I am so fortunate that those were the last words of my father that I remember the way I remember him. So this is a story um, about doing today, you know, doing today those things that need to be done today, to not put things off. It is a reminder to keep what is important in front of us, to focus on what is really important. So not to procrastinate. For me, I am very fortunate. When I put my hands together in Gasho, I remember my father and I appreciate all the things that came together so that I could be with my father on that day, the day before he died. And um, he he did, you know, he didn't forget to tell me something important. Um, and I appreciate this on so many different levels. It makes me remember that I appreciate all the sacrifices of others. As we all know, Buddhism, um, in Buddhism, we try to see the universe as it really is, not as the way we want it to be. The way it really is. And we have to realize that all living things will die. They they will die because they were born. The cause of death is not old age or illness or an accident. The cause of death is birth. Because we are born, we will have to die. Everything in this world changes. So today, we are reminded that our beloved pets, have died. We have to remember them. And today I remember that my parents have died. And someday, probably soon, I too will die. because change is always around us, and we somehow have to see the universe as it really is, not as the way we want it to be. And we have to learn to accept and understand all the changes going on around us. Nam Amida Butsu, with gratitude and kindness beyond words.